The morning sun lit up Ouagadougou in soft golden light as President Ibrahim Traoré stepped out of the presidential palace. Unlike most mornings packed with meetings and official duties, this Monday felt different. He had made a decision that would surprise his team, and change lives. "Take me to the central prison," he quietly told his driver, adjusting his plain brown shirt. "No advance notice. No media. Just us." The driver looked at him in the mirror, shocked. "Sir, shouldn't we let the prison know and arrange some security?" "No," Traore replied firmly. "I want to see the real conditions. No cleanups. No shows." The black presidential car drove through the busy streets of the capital, followed only by two unmarked vehicles. Street vendors called out, kids played in dusty alleys, and life moved on, unaware that their president was heading into the heart of the prison system. 40 minutes later, the small convoy stopped in front of the tall gray walls of Ouagadougou's central prison. Razor wire shimmered at the top, and the air felt heavy. The guards at the gate froze when they saw who it was. "Mr. President," one stammered, fumbling with his keys. "We weren't told you were coming, sir." "Exactly," Traore said as he stepped out. "Open the gates." The prison warden, Pascal Wedraow, came rushing over, sweat on his forehead even in the morning chill. "Your Excellency, if we had known, we would have cleaned up, prepared. I didn't come for a show," the president said, walking past him. "I came to meet the prisoners. Take me to them." The warden looked confused but didn't argue. He led the president down a narrow hallway filled with echoes, coughing, faint voices, the clanging of metal doors. A strong smell hit them, sweat, damp walls, and a feeling of deep sadness. As they entered the main prison block, a strange silence spread. Hundreds of prisoners who had just been lying around, playing cards, or staring at the walls slowly got to their feet. Their faces showed shock, confusion, and something rare, hope. President Traore walked among them, shaking hands, asking questions, and listening closely. Even his own guards were surprised. "How long have you been here?" he asked one man. 3 years, Mr. President," the man replied. "Theft," the man said. "Do you have a family?" the president asked. "Yes, sir. A wife and 2 kids. They visit when they can afford the trip." The president nodded quietly and walked on, keeping each story in mind. Some prisoners spoke openly. Others were quiet. A few couldn't hold back their tears. It wasn't every day their president came to see them. For more than an hour, President Traore moved through the crowded prison. He sat on cold floors, shook hands, and connected with people that the outside world had forgotten. But then he noticed a darker, smaller cell at the far end. A man sat there alone, his head down, hands resting loosely in his lap. His beard was messy, his clothes were worn out, and his whole body seemed tired, as if he had stopped expecting anything from life. While other inmates had rushed to see the president, this man didn't move. He just sat there, as if nothing surprised him anymore. President Traore slowly walked up to the cell. The man looked up, meeting his eyes with quiet sadness and deep exhaustion. There was something different about him. He didn't look like a criminal. He looked like someone who had been broken by life. "What's your name?" the president asked gently. "Emmanuel," he said, barely above a whisper. "How long have you been here, Emmanuel?" 7 years, sir." The words hung in the air. 7 years. The president studied his face. There was no anger. No hate. Just calm acceptance. It moved him deeply. This was someone who had suffered, but hadn't lost his dignity. "What were you accused of?" Emmanuel paused, swallowed hard, then said, "They said I stole money from my boss. But I didn't, sir. I worked for him for years. He needed someone to blame, and I was the easy choice." As he spoke, his voice grew stronger. It was like something inside him was waking up, like being truly heard was giving him back a piece of himself. The president kept listening, reading between the lines. Even before the conversation was over, he knew this meeting would change everything, for both of them. In this quiet, forgotten cell, justice was finally being seen and heard, through the voice of a man no one expected. The president stood there in silence, still looking into Emmanuel's eyes, as the distant sounds of prison life continued around them. Emmanuel kept talking, his voice steadier now. "I didn't have a lawyer," he said. "No one spoke for me. I stood alone in court while my old boss sat there with expensive attorneys. The judge hardly looked at me before saying, 15 years. The president felt a cold anger rise inside him. "What's your boss's name?" he asked. "Laurent Geyer," Emmanuel replied. "He runs a trucking company. I worked for him 8 years, always on time, never missed a day. Then his nephew needed my job." Emmanuel's voice faded, the hurt still fresh. President Traore turned to the warden. "Bring me this man's file, every paper, every bit of evidence, everything from his trial." "Sir, it may take a while, you have until sunset," the president snapped. "I also want the names of the arresting officers, the judge, everyone involved." The warden hurried away. Traore faced Emmanuel again. "Why didn't you appeal? Surely you had options." Emmanuel let out a bitter, quiet laugh. "With what money, sir? My wife left the first year. She took our children to her parents' village, she couldn't bear the shame. I had no money for appeals, no connections, no one to listen." The president's resolve hardened. This wasn't just one man's pain, it showed a system that let the powerful walk free while the poor suffered. "Has anyone visited you in 7 years?" he asked. "No one," Emmanuel said. "I wrote letters the first 2 years, but no one answered. I stopped trying and found peace in being alone." That evening, President Traore sat in his office at the Ministry of Justice with Emmanuel's thick case file spread out before him. What he read made his blood boil. The investigation was sloppy, the evidence weak, and the trial had lasted less than 2 hours. Worst of all, the judge, Justice Amadou Diabre, had been fired 3 years ago for taking bribes. The man who sent Emmanuel to prison was a criminal himself. Traore grabbed the phone. "Defrain," he told the justice minister, "come here at once. Cancel everything else." An hour later, Minister Defrain entered to find the president pacing like a caged lion. "I visited the central prison today," Traore began. "I met a man named Emmanuel who has been stuck in a cell for 7 years for a crime he almost certainly didn't commit," the president said, handing the file to the justice minister. "Read everything. Tell me how our courts failed this badly." As Minister Dufresne flipped through the pages, his face turned pale. The case was a mess, fake evidence, a corrupt judge, and no defense lawyer. Emmanuel's rich boss, Laurent Geyer, had used his money and contacts to frame him, and the system had played along. "This is awful," the minister whispered. "But, sir, the conviction still stands." "We can't do what?" the president cut in. "Can't seek justice. Can't admit we jailed an innocent man for 7 years." Dufresne fell silent, knowing he couldn't argue. "Here's what we'll do," the president said. "Tomorrow, set up an independent review team, prosecutors, defense lawyers, and human rights observers. Start this case from scratch. And investigate Geyer. If he framed Emmanuel once, he's likely done it before." In the next 48 hours, the team worked non-stop. They found that Geyer's company had pressed similar charges against 5 other workers in the past decade. All were poor, had no lawyers, and were quickly convicted. The pattern was clear. Worse, the team proved several key documents in Emmanuel's file were fake. His confession was forged, and the financial records were altered. When the team reported back, President Traore felt both anger and relief. Emmanuel had been framed, his life ruined by a rich man's greed and a broken system. We will free him, the president vowed. And we'll fix our courts so this never happens again. The next morning, Traore returned to the prison with reporters and a legal team. The country was about to see its leader set things right in person. Cameras followed the president down the familiar halls. Word spread that something big was happening. Emmanuel sat in his cell, unaware of the growing noise outside. 7 years of false hope had taught him not to expect miracles. Then he heard footsteps coming toward his door. Emmanuel barely looked up. He thought it was just another routine check, or maybe a new cellmate. "Emmanuel," came a voice he hadn't stopped thinking about for 3 days. When he finally looked up, he didn't just see President Traore. He saw cameras, lawyers, and serious faces standing behind him. His heart started to race, but after 7 years, he didn't want to believe what he was seeing. "Emmanuel," the president said clearly, his voice echoing through the now silent prison. "I've read your file. You weren't just wrongly accused, you were failed by a system that should have protected you." Every word was caught on camera. Inmates all around the prison crowded their cell doors, trying to see what was happening. "I'm sorry," the president said, his voice filled with emotion. "Our country let you down. Our courts let you down. But today, we start making things right." He turned to the legal team beside him. "Emmanuel, you're going home today." For a second, Emmanuel couldn't believe what he'd just heard. Home. After 7 years, the word felt strange. His legs went weak, and he held on to the cell bars for balance. This is real?" he asked, tears running down his face. "Yes," the president said firmly. "You're a free man." The cell door opened, for the last time. Emmanuel stepped into the hallway, his steps shaky. Then, loud cheers broke out from the other inmates. Their voices echoed through the prison, celebrating a rare moment of true justice. Some wept, seeing hope in Emmanuel's release. Outside the prison, a crowd had gathered. Word had spread fast across Ouagadougou. People had come to witness this historic moment. As Emmanuel stepped into the sunlight, his first in years, he squinted. The crowd clapped and cheered. Reporters pushed microphones toward him. "How do you feel? What will you do now? Are you angry at those who wronged you?" Emmanuel stood still, overwhelmed by the attention, the noise, the feeling of freedom. "I don't know how to feel," he said quietly. "I have no family, no home, no job. But for the first time in 7 years, I have hope. And maybe that's enough to begin again." President Traore put a steady hand on his shoulder. "You're not alone," he told him, his voice strong and clear. "Our nation owes you a debt we can never fully repay. But we'll help you rebuild your life." And true to his word, President Traore drove Emmanuel himself to the presidential guest house, where he could stay until a long-term home was found. For Emmanuel, a hot shower, clean clothes, and dinner at a real table felt like stepping into another world. That evening, they sat together in a quiet lounge, 2 cups of tea between them. The gap between president and prisoner faded, they were just 2 men talking. "Tell me your dreams," Traore asked. "Before all this, what did you want from life?" Emmanuel smiled, his first true smile in years. "I wanted to be a teacher. I studied education before taking the job with Gayer. I love helping children learn." "Then you'll teach," the president said. "We'll help you finish your studies, and when you're ready, you'll have a place in our schools." But Traore was already thinking bigger. Over the next few days, as Emmanuel got used to freedom, the president planned a full audit of the prison system. If this could happen to Emmanuel, he told his cabinet, how many others are locked up for crimes they didn't commit? Some ministers worried. What if hundreds of bad convictions came to light? What if people lost faith in the courts? "Then we fix it," Traore said. "All of it. Justice delayed is justice denied, and we've delayed it too long. Within a week he launched Operation Justice Light, a national review of every prisoner held more than 5 years, with extra focus on those who never had a lawyer. Emmanuel wasn't just a beneficiary, he became the face, and soon a leader, of the reform. 3 months later, he stood before a packed hall at the University of Ouagadougou. In a crisp white shirt and dark jacket, he looked nothing like the broken man who had left prison. "I speak to you today not as a victim," he told the silent crowd, his voice strong, but as proof of what happens when power has no checks, and of what's possible when leaders choose courage over comfort. President Traore sat in the front row, proud to watch Emmanuel speak to the law students. The talk was Emmanuel's idea, he wanted future lawyers and judges to hear his story firsthand. Meanwhile, Operation Justice Light was changing the country. In just 6 months, review teams had looked at over 2,000 cases and found 347 people who were either wrongly jailed or kept past their release dates. Behind every case were broken families, lost chances, and lives damaged by a justice system that had lost its way. The review also uncovered a wider web of corruption. Wealthy business owners like Laurent Guyer had paid bribes, faked evidence, and bullied witnesses to silence employees, rivals, or critics. Now Guyer sat in the same prison where Emmanuel had spent 7 years, this time facing charges of fraud, bribery, and conspiracy. Emmanuel even visited him, telling his former boss, "Justice isn't revenge. It's the hope that no one else has to suffer, your greed hurt you, and my innocence hurt me." The moment moved everyone who heard about it, including the president. Traore soon made Emmanuel a special advisor for prison reform and human rights, a new role that quickly became vital. Emmanuel traveled across Burkina Faso, inspecting big city prisons and small rural jails forgotten for decades. In Dori, he found a man who had sat in a cell for 12 years without a trial. In Bobo Dioulasso, he discovered 3 women jailed for economic crimes that were really just cases of poverty. Each story fueled his mission and showed how indifference can twist justice. But Emmanuel knew true reform meant more than opening cell doors. He pushed for job training and education, counseling and medical care, help reuniting families, free legal aid for anyone who can't afford a lawyer. Freedom isn't only about unlocking a cell, he told an audience of international human rights workers. It's about giving people the tools to rebuild their lives, and making sure the same mistakes never happen again. Real justice means giving people the tools to rebuild their lives, Emmanuel told the human rights observers. We must fix a system that once served the powerful instead of the people. President Traore fully backed this vision. Under his lead, Burkina Faso became a model for fair courts in West Africa. The country opened free legal aid centers in every region, ordered new training for judges and prosecutors, and set up an independent prison oversight board, headed by Emmanuel himself. The reforms did stir trouble. Some powerful figures who liked the old system called the president naive and said Emmanuel just wanted revenge. But public support stayed strong, especially as more families were reunited and more wrongful cases were corrected. 1 year after his release, Emmanuel returned to Ouagadougou's central prison for an event no one could have imagined months earlier. The prison had been renovated, cleaner cells, classes, and legal aid offices. Over the entrance hung a new plaque, "Justice delayed is justice denied, never again." Facing a crowd of officials, ex-prisoners, and families, Emmanuel spoke, "A year ago, I sat in a cell thinking the world had forgotten me. I was wrong. The world hadn't forgotten, it just wasn't listening. Today we celebrate not only my freedom but our promise that every voice will be heard, every case judged fairly, and every person treated with dignity." President Traore spoke briefly after him. Sometimes a leader's best work is knowing when to follow. Emmanuel has taught our nation more about justice than any law book. The work isn't finished, but our foundation is solid. When the ceremony ended, Emmanuel paused outside his old cell, now a small library stocked with books on law, human rights, and social justice. Sunlight shone through the bars, lighting the pages that would guide future generations. As Emmanuel walked away, he didn't carry bitterness for the years he had lost. Instead, He carried hope for the lives that would be saved by the changes he and others had fought for. He had learned that justice is not a final stop, it is an ongoing journey, one that needs constant watchfulness, bravery, and a willingness to listen to those whom others ignore. The sun set over Ouagadougou in bright orange and purple, and Burkina Faso kept moving forward on its own path to a fairer tomorrow.